Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we will be learning to do the moss stitch. This stitch is also sometimes called the linen stitch, and as you can see here in this cotton yarn, it does kind of have a linen texture to it. It is also a lighter and airier stitch in comparison to just a complete single crochet piece. It has the tightness of the stitch without having all the bulk. It's also a very good beginner stitch to do, because it only requires you to know how to do two techniques, which is the single crochet and the chain. And if you've been keeping up with my step-by-step tutorial, I have videos on how to do both of those there. So today I'm going to show you how to do the standard moss stitch, which is in this piece here, as you can see. But stick around to the end and I'm going to show you a small trick on how to get these curvy edges to look a lot neater, like this one here, which is incredibly useful if you don't plan on adding a border. I do recommend you experiment with both to see what works best for your project. For today, I'll be using a 5mm hook, some medium acrylic yarn. Now you can really use whatever hook or yarn you have at hand. This is a very versatile stitch. To start, we will be doing a slip stitch. If you do not know how to do this, feel free to refer back to my step-by-step tutorials. I do have a video on how to create this slip stitch. Next we'll be making the chain. This chain can be as short or as long as your project needs, as long as it's an even number of stitches. For this tutorial I'll be doing 10. Next we're going to add a turning chain. Depending on what stitch you're doing with this project determines how many chains you need for the turning. With a single crochet, which is what we'll be doing today, you only need one extra chain. But if you're doing a half double, you'd need 2. If you're doing a double crochet, you'd need 3. Now this pattern works with all of these stitches or even a combination of them. But don't let that get confusing at this point. We're just going to keep it real simple and add that extra 1 for the single crochet. Starting the pattern. First thing we're going to do is figure out which stitch to work first. So we will do 1, 2, 3. That's going to be our first one. 1 for a turning chain, 1 for a chain 1 space. And we're going to work a single crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook. We're going to chain 1, we're going to skip 1 chain, we're going to work into the next, a single crochet. Chain 1, chain 1, skip 1 into the next chain. Chain 1, skip 1, and this is my last chain. Remember, if you do it right, you should end with a single crochet in your very last chain. This is what your first row should look like. So your first row should have ended with 5 single crochets and 5 chain 1 spaces. For the second row, we're going to chain 2, 1 for your turning chain, one for your first chain one space. We're going to flip your work over. Remember to turn at the end of every row. And we're just going to start by working into these chain one spaces. Single crochet into your chain one. Then just like before, chain one. We're going to skip this single crochet. I'm going to go straight into the chain one space. Single crochet in here. Chain one. Skip the single crochet right to the chain one space. And again to the end of your row. You should end with a single crochet in your final chain one space. This one's always kind of hard to make out, but if you look, you can see the single crochet there, and then your turning chain and your chain are here. Right, and there. Alright, that's row 2. And every other row just goes this way. So chain 2, 1, 2, turn your work, 1 single crochet in your first chain 1 space, so you got 1 single crochet there, your first chain 1 space right in front of it. Chain 1, pass that to the first, chain 1, and then again straight to your final chain space with your turning chain and your first chain space from the last row. And that's how you do the moss stitch. So again, this is just a real easy beginner pattern. You just 1, 2, keep working into the chain 1 spaces. Eventually you might even find your mind wandering, thinking about other things. This is such a simple stitch. But if you do have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. And I will answer it to the best of my ability. Alright, here's my completed 10 by 10 piece. But as you can tell, these edges are still pretty wavy. If you're okay with this look, by all means go with it. If you plan on adding a border or maybe making a bag and doing a stitching along it, that's no big deal. But if you don't plan on doing those things and you plan on making this into like a blanket, then you might want to have a straighter edge. So as promised, I'm going to show you how to do that. It's actually pretty simple. The basic pattern stays the same. You still want to start with an even number of chains. Essentially all we're going to do is we're going to leave out the turning chain. So we are going to start on the second instead of the third chain from the hook, because we only want that chain 1 space. That's where our single crochet is going to go into. And we still chain 1, still skip 1, and single crochet to the next chain space. this part remains the same all the way to the end. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet, and this is where that change really comes. We're just skipping the turning chain. So instead of chaining 2 at the end, we're only going to chain 1. And I do recommend keeping this a little loose, otherwise it can be hard to find. Okay, and just like before, we're going to turn our work. And we're going to work straight into this first chain 1 space. Single crochet, and the rest stays the same. Chain, skip the single crochet, and go into the chain 1 space all the way across. When you get to the very end, you have your single crochet here, and you're actually just going to put your last single into this chain 1. And that's it. That's the only difference. Instead of chaining 2, you chain 1 at the beginning of each row. You do everything else the same. At the end of this row, your last will go into that chain 1 space. Again, I do recommend leaving it loose because it can be kind of hard to find if you don't. And as that goes on, you'll be getting a straight, even border. Alright, well, if you've liked these tutorials and what you've seen here today, feel free to click that thumbs up button below. And remember to always fasten off your projects by clicking that subscribe. And we'll see you next time.